And then the next big hop, the next technology was JFK, John Kennedy, who really mastered what you're supposed to look like on television, and Richard
Mhm.
Nixon, and Richard Nixon did not. Okay, and
Yeah.
and
About 20 some years now, when podcasting started, is now arguably the most powerful, dominant form of media because it's giving people what they want, which is number one, there are no barriers, are no borders to get into the business. And I saw this happening the first time Trump showed up on a podcast. I said, he just won.
the Bill of Rights is what allows the Constitution to be an effective operating system so that the overall country continues to progress. If you really want to be a great entrepreneur in the United States, look to the first 10 amendments as the basis for your opportunity.
It's genius. Genius. All right, we just lived through an unbelievably fascinating experience and experiment with the new administration. Donald Trump is the new president-elect, and I would argue that he won because of podcasts. What this episode is all about, Dan is an amazing historian. We're going to talk about who mastered what mediums first and how that created decisive wins in political history, starting with Roosevelt. So, what you can expect is to see a lot of conversation about what medium, from radio to television to cable to social media, has been responsible for elevating huge personalities that took advantage of these and had the foresight or accidentally fell into it, whatever it was. But Dan's got the inside dope on this. You're going to learn a ton, both historically, but also about the power of influence and creating momentum that you can use in your business, in your life as well. So, Dan, let's talk about, first of all, do you want to start at the end, which is probably one of the most fascinating things about how long format podcasts created a massive movement that the Democrats had no idea what hit them, in my opinion. And then we'll go. We can start at the beginning, but I'll let you decide where we're going to start first.
Yeah, well, first of all, the historical range between Roosevelt and Trump, is interesting to me because when I was born, Roosevelt was the president. So I was born in 1944. He had been president for 12 years, and he had just been reelected for the fourth time. He's the only
Mm-hmm.
president elected more than twice, and they instituted an amendment to the Constitution that he would be the last. You could never have that again. You only get two terms. But we were at Genius Network, and we were at a
Bob
great
Castellini's house. Yeah.
great party at Bob Castellini's house, which is a house to experience. He's got a phenomenal house on top of about as high as you can go up on Camelback Mountain and look out at Paradise Valley.
Sanctuary. Breathtaking, breathtaking.
Yeah. And we were just chatting, and we got on a riff. We started talking about technologies, communication technologies. And the thing that won it for Roosevelt more than anything else, because he was crippled, he was in a wheelchair. The thing that got him was his mastery of radio that made it seem as if the president of the United States, was talking to you in your living room, listening to your radio. And other politicians did this. I mean, Hitler came to power using the radio. Mussolini came to power using the radio. And so it was a time for a new technology. Everybody had a radio, sometimes more than one radio, and they took advantage of it, and their opponents hadn't mastered that yet. Okay, they were still stump speeching. They were taking train rides and going to a
Mm-hmm.
new, or they were depending on the newspapers, or they were depending on the syndicated magazines and everything else. But Roosevelt just broke through. And that went through. And then the next big hop, the next technology was JFK, John Kennedy, who really mastered what you're supposed to look like on television, and
Mhm.
Richard Nixon did not. Okay, and
Yeah.
and and
That is, if you want to see why you need media training, go watch that Nixon
well, his
swing.
dad was deeply involved in Hollywood, and so they brought the best Hollywood talent. The people who prepared you to go in front of the camera, the lighting, the makeup, and just your delivery. And he clearly had gone through this training. I think not just for the presidency. I think he had gone through it much earlier in life, and it was the election was very, very close. He had the fact that he was Catholic going against him, and there had never been a Catholic president. And so he had that. There was an anti-Irish, you know, there was bias against Irish people, and he was the first Irish, from descended from people from Ireland and everything else. And that was the next one that I can remember. Reagan really continued that trend. Reagan was as good on TV as JFK was. Reagan was always good on TV. He always knew where the camera angles were. He always knew what his
Yep.
position was. And then, I think when Obama came along, he was the first one to really take advantage of social media.
Yep.
So it was in 2008, 2012. And in every case, so I want to say one thing, going back to Reagan. Actually, Reagan was a breakthrough, and it had to do with great, great marketing genius, Richard Viguerie.
That's
And
right. Direct
Richard had,
mail specifically.
yeah, direct mail. And Richard had figured out, based on just postal zones, there's 40,000 postal zones in the United States. He had figured out what the issues were in all the postal codes that were going to make an electoral difference. Okay. And he just sent messages. And, a lot of people don't know it, but still the most effective, cost-effective form of communication in the world is still direct mail. And the reason
Mhm.
is because nobody uses it. So if you use it, people get 100 emails, mostly they just disregard. But if you get three letters and they're waiting for you when you get home, you open it up and look at all the letters. But Richard Viguerie in the 1970s really figured out, one of the great marketing geniuses who's still alive from the
Yeah.
1970s. And
Yeah.
Richard's in his 90s and still going strong. Okay. And then Trump took a card from Obama, and he
Yeah.
went in
But let's
2000.
do Clinton. Remember Clinton and cable.
Clinton and cable. Yeah, Clinton. Yeah, Clinton went on the cable shows. He went the late night cable shows with his saxophone, and he would just have conversations. So that's really great. Yeah, and there's a lot of people who breathe easy when they found out that Clinton couldn't run for a third term on the Republican side. I mean, Bill Clinton, if he had run a third time, would have won. Bill Clinton, if he had run a fourth time, would have won. And anyway, I mean, he's just a made in heaven kind of political candidate. I mean, just he
Still
just
one of the greatest orators of all
and
time.
not only that, but when he was talking to you, you were the most special person in the whole universe. He could turn an enemy into an admirer in about 30 minutes. I mean, he was just
Astonishing.
astonishing.
Absolutely astonishing.
But Trump went deeper with the social media, and he didn't do Facebook. He did Twitter, and they just did it for a very small number of electoral districts. And what
Yep.
they
Yep.
what they went after were 220 uh, voting districts, and
Yep.
yeah, there was they 220, and they were in five states. These were the swing states:
Yep.
Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania. I think there was one more that they
Right.
did, and these were all districts that had voted for Obama in the previous two elections. where
Yep.
Obama promised hope and change, and the message they went out, well, where's the hope and where's the change? And they just went. So it was people who had voted for Obama who bypassed Hillary and voted for Trump because Hillary was perhaps one of the worst presidents on TV or to do. I mean, you wouldn't want Hillary on a podcast, I mean, she's just horribly stiff. I mean, apparently in person, very gracious,
Mhm.
funny,
Yeah.
everything, but just had
Yeah.
she had
Yeah.
no front.
Front stage and backstage, very different. I've known people have known her for a long time, and that's I think part of it is she had to fight the system she fought, or believe she had to stay within it in order to appear strong, and that never served.
She just froze when she was in front of camera, uh, you know, um, yeah. Yeah. Anyway, and then Trump won the first time, and this has a lot to do. What You brought up the topic, so you go into the Trump thing, bring us up to date. What happened there? And you were using, you know, very very long unplanned, unprepared, unstructured um, podcasts, long podcasts. And
Yep.
by the very nature of what those podcasts are, the other party can't use them.
Yes. And I'll add my 2 cents here because I've been podcasting since before the technology even was mainstream, before it was easy, and this is going back into the early 2000s, and there's a guy. Adam Curry's his name, the Podfather. I know him. He's a friend. He lives in Austin, Texas, and he was originally an MTV or VJ is what they called him at the time. So he was, I think he may have been the first guy ever on MTV. And but if you evolve a little bit, he developed what's known as the RSS feed for podcasts, and it was basically a way of connecting audio files together and creating a player so you could listen to long format content on your computer. And then they had a hack that let you put these on an iPod when they were basically a hard drive in your pocket in the old days. And then eventually they made it work. And then Apple, Steve Jobs met with Adam and saw the vision and basically made the Apple Podcasts app. So that's the origin. But the problem always was, where's the audience? And people just looked at it and thought it was a giant waste of time. Just like crypto, which is now trading over $90,000 for Bitcoin. But the point is that later went into video podcasts, and of course we had what YouTube did. But here's what's important about podcasts: they're like audiobooks in the sense that unbelievably intimate form of communication. Now, if you look a little bit further, Joe Rogan and also Gary V were two of the very first video podcasters out there. Gary V did Wine Library TV, which was him drinking wine on like grainy TV. Again, hard to download. It was back in the old days when it took forever. You had to be very committed to consume this content. But he ended up getting thousands and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, eventually hundreds of thousands of viewers, visitors, and got to practice his craft. Just like getting media trained, just like Nixon didn't do and JFK did. And then here we got Joe Rogan, which as of right now, you could argue commands a larger audience than all of cable and traditional media combined. Hundreds of millions of viewers. So the point of all of that is, if you look backwards, going back about 20 some years now, when podcasting started, is now arguably the most powerful, dominant form of media because it's giving people what they want, which is number one. There are no barriers, are no borders to get into the business. So it's absolutely digitized and democratized.
There's no gatekeepers.
Nothing. They
Yeah.
are free.
Yeah.
They're easy. They're accessible on any device, anywhere. There are no rules. You don't have regulatory bodies or the big networks. And Lex Friedman has done 6.5 hour podcasts now. Okay. And People want intimate, long format content to get to know someone, and a host who knows how to talk about more than whatever someone else's agenda is. And Joe Rogan, in my opinion, the reason for the giant sweep, and I saw this happening the first time Trump showed up on a podcast. I said, he just won. And he went on Theo Vaughn, which is, if you haven't heard of him, he's a nutto, former addict podcaster who's got hockey hair and looks and sounds like he grew up in a trailer park because he basically did. Absolute coke addict and everything else, but he's in recovery. And he disarms his guests with fascinating questions. All In podcast, which arguably is driving the mindset of Silicon Valley founders and entrepreneurs who are sick and tired of San Francisco culture, who flipped many, many, many Democrats with money, led initially by Thiel, Peter Thiel, who was one of J.D. Vance's biggest sponsors for many years. And then, of course, Joe Rogan and Lex Friedman, and there are some other ands, but the net is largely uncommitted, non-voting young men flipped. I believe the numbers, if you look at it, if you want to know where the extra 7, 8 million came from, I would argue a huge percentage were right there. They said, screw this. I like this guy. And Trump went from a comical character to a decisive winner. And podcast ran it. And that's why I wanted to do this, because when you look at the progress from who mastered the latest media, and it's not the latest, it's not the newest, but it hit that impossible to beat volume of consumers. Okay, I'm done with that part.
Yeah, the big thing about it is I've got a next quarter book, not the book that right now I'm writing a book called Creating Great Leadership. Okay, so that's the title of the one that I'm doing right now. And but the next one is going to be called The Bill of Rights Economy. Okay, and what the Bill of Rights is, the first 10 amendments of the U.S. Constitution. And these were amendments that were put in right at the time that the Constitution was ratified, 1787. And the reason for them that this was the entire opposition to there being a federal government. You had 13 colonies and they came together, they fought the war, they won independence. And then they said, let's create a government that, the power of all 13 colonies becomes the United States, and it becomes. And Madison, who was he was sort of the programmer of the Constitution, James Madison. And he said, if we don't include everybody who's scared of what we're doing here, if we don't put that up front, you have the articles, you have the articles of the Constitution, but as soon as the articles, you have these first 10 amendments, and the first one is freedom of assembly and freedom of speech. Okay. Well, podcasting is the First Amendment communication medium, is that you get to say whatever you want to say. Okay. And you can do it any way you want, and you can do it to the whole world, and there's no interference from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no such thing as political speech. There's no thing as political. I mean, you can say anything you want you take your chances, because you may get it's the take your chances for amendment to the Constitution. If you want to say something in public, you go ahead and say it. Can't guarantee you what the consequences are going to be. But if you want to take the risk and you got the medium and you got the audience, go for it, so I'm going through and showing that the economy that came out of the first 10 amendments is a purely entrepreneurial economy. Okay. And I looked up the founders, the ones who signed the Declaration, and a lot of them went on to sign ratify the Constitution, and they were all basically entrepreneurs. But the
Yeah.
United States is a country for the entrepreneurs, or by the entrepreneurs, of the entrepreneurs, for the entrepreneurs. They were all entrepreneurs. So what do we have to put in as safeguards that the government can't screw us over? What do you think about that?
First of all, I love the idea of creating contrast to the Bill of Rights. So while you were talking, I went and reread all the Bill of Rights through the context of this new book idea. And so the First Amendment is speech, second is arms, third is soldiers in time of peace be quartered in any house. So basically, the military can't just take over your stuff. Again, it's ownership. Fourth is unreasonable search and seizure. Again, it's ownership of property. Fifth Amendment is, um, um, subject for the same. Basically, it's criminal. You can't just stack a whole bunch of crimes on someone and hold them for an unreasonable period of time. Basically, do property. It's private property again. At the end of the
Yeah,
day, you just can't take people's
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, it's private
You need
property, and
public
that
trial.
nine and 10 are really interesting because nine is
I don't
that,
understand nine.
yeah, nine
Enumeration of
means
the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed or deny or disparage others retained by the people. So, uh, yeah, help me out there.
basically, if you you can do anything you want that's not regulated. In other words, you can create entirely new activities. And if it doesn't come under any regulation, you're free to do it. And the 10th says that what we haven't said the federal governments can do, that states can do it.
States can, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is again, then you get to choose where to live
Choose where to
within
live.
reason, of course. Yeah. The
The other thing is
pursuit
it
of wealth.
guarantees,
Yeah.
the other thing is it guarantees transportation of goods and services across state lines, and the government federal government cannot interfere with that. Like in Canada, for example, you can't produce beer in one province and sell it in the next province.
Mm,
I think the breweries had something to do with that.
yeah. And again, what that does is encourage entrepreneurial
Yep,
behavior to
yep.
create more wealth and create more property and more IP, which is again, what I'm taking from this is you're going to re-examine the fundamental operating system of the United States of America, which you could say the Constitution is one thing, but the Bill of Rights is really giving the power to the individual to innovate.
Yep,
And
yep.
if we stack on top of that, how do you create wealth? You the first to innovate, the first to iterate, and the first to bring it to market is always the winner. And then the first, going back to what your big push is these days, protect your IP. And all of those are built
Mhm.
into the system, which is protect, license. Um, these opportunities are phenomenal, and I have an interesting story about a breakthrough that I had related to property ownership and IP, but it might not fit into this particular episode, which is again all about the media. Not that we ever play by the rules, but if we go backwards just a little bit, first of all, I'd love to hear your reflection on what I just said and how it fits into your book.
Yeah, well, the big thing about it is that if you take a big circle, and that's the United States, and then you have a smaller circle that holds the United States together as the Constitution, and then you go to a smaller circle in the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is what allows the Constitution to be an effective operating system so that the overall country continues to progress. When you
Hmm.
get to, when you go a smaller circle in the Bill of Rights, it's entrepreneurs. The country was created by entrepreneurs. They were of entrepreneurs, by entrepreneurs, for entrepreneurs. And there was no other way to make a living except to self-create your business, you know. And that was, 1620 is the first permanent settlement in English Canada, English North America. And then you go 150 years, 56 years, you get the Declaration of Independence. The states, the colonies have formed. And in
Hmm.
every case, the thing that was driving this was pure entrepreneurial activity. There was right from the beginning, it was an entrepreneurial country. And I just said that if we go back and examine the first 10 amendments, which protect the individual from the government. That's basically the reason for the Bill of Rights, is to protect the individual from the government, because government always colludes against the individual if you
Yeah.
don't have checks and balances. And what I did is I took each of the amendments apart and I found five entrepreneurial payoffs from the First Amendment, Second Amendment, right through to the 10th Amendment. And I'm going to write a little book on, if you really want to be a great entrepreneur in the United States, look to the first 10 amendments as the basis for your opportunity.
It's genius. Genius.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. That'll be out in March. That book will
Okay.
be out in March. Yeah.
Welcome to the world of 3-second attention spans and fewer than 20 seconds to get a prospect's attention, engage them, get to know, like, and trust you, and say, I want and need what you have. Let's make a deal. Now, introducing Digital Cafe AI, a relationship building AI that will take your hard-earned leads and make them feel like you're sitting down with them for a cup of coffee, listening to their needs and responding to them with a personalized, useful, resourceful solution. It's the perfect AI team. A Digital Cafe AI does hours or days of work that normally requires an expensive team of specialists in minutes. It's the fastest, easiest, automated way to get attention, engagement, and trust to close bigger deals faster. A Digital Cafe AI is a done-for-you service that can be adapted to any B2B or B2C business. Money loves speed, and time kills deals. So visit Digital Cafe AI to see how it will work for you. So let's tie this together, because I'm gonna present something that I have absolutely no idea where it'll go, but you always synthesize an interesting point of view. So I'm going to reflect back the history of media, which is, let's say, Roosevelt mastering radio, intimate conversation, bringing you into your bedrooms and your living rooms with the whole family, listening and talking and creating conversation. Because what would you be talking about yesterday? It's the fireside chat, which was long format. Okay. Radio, they could have made a show that went on for a year. Okay. It went on as long as he could hold attention. Advanced to JFK, a face made for TV.
Well, the
The
other thing, the radio networks took it if he was talking in Washington, people in
Right,
California,
massive amplification,
People in Hawaii
multiplication.
heard it. People in
Yeah.
Hawaii heard it. The networks, radio networks.
So yeah, it's one button broadcast. Now that's back when it cost a lot of money, and before I think all the profit making, profit taking mindsets in the networks and squeezing out every last drop came into being. But during that innovation cycle, that's always the best time to be around. It's when the pure entrepreneurship's at work, and engineers and geniuses play with a new technology. And then TV, I'd say the same thing, although the stakes are bigger. It's a lot more expensive. You got optics, much more bandwidth, a lot more hardware, a lot more money. But here's JFK performing on stage, and same thing, worldwide broadcast, multiplier effect, massive multiplier. If we advance to Reagan and direct mail, now that's not digital, or whether it's broadcast, which again is infinite. Here you do have different resources and tools, but affordable. There's an endless supply of trees. From one point of view, a friend of mine used to say, yeah, well, what happens if we run out? And he goes, well, we chop down more trees and we print more books. But there again, it required strategy. There are some resources, but it turned into a math problem. And also being able to be an incredible writer, which I would say, Benjamin Franklin, back in the day, he persuaded countries and cultures with his pen. And the origin, I don't, did you by any chance watch the Michael Douglas, Benjamin Franklin show, the series?
Hmm.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's very captivating, and it really is a great story about how he swayed the French into financing his war and how he played everyone against each other and how unbelievably strategic he was in keeping his enemies close and playing everyone. Just a strategic genius, but it all was about the printing press.
Yep.
That
And
was his
pure
power.
entrepreneur too.
Totally.
Franklin, pure
It is a
entrepreneur.
I highly recommend the series. It's exceptional. And then so we go from Reagan to Clinton and cable. So again, we skip mediums, and then Obama and early social. Again, I would say that was when social was a little more pure before it became an algorithmic disaster and nightmare. Um, Not that the manipulation didn't exist, but it was different. And then Trump took advantage of outrage and I think his first wave of fake news and decimation, and he could really plow into the idea of this is made up. You can't trust these institutions. Um, but
The
you know,
interesting thing, if I can just bring
yeah,
in there about
please.
Trump, that when he ran, he's just off, a dozen years of being on The Apprentice. We knew Donald Trump in 2016 because he had been a big star on reality TV for 12 years.
Yeah.
And we knew him. But his big thing was he didn't go after the Democrats. I don't remember him going after the Democrats. He didn't even go after Hillary, except to call her crooked. Uh,
Hmm.
eh, you know, he went after the media. The enemy was the media. And
Yeah.
within a period of 8 years, I think he's destroyed the validity of the mainstream media.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
according to your thesis, he created room for podcasting to become the major media.
as a political tool, I think there's a tie-in there. I do think there's two divergent things that also happened, and one is the rise of the game show host as a political character because Arnold Schwarzenegger did that before Trump. So basically, remember when the I can remember when not Jesse the Body, but in my home state of Minnesota when the wrestler won against the contingent two politicians. I think it was
Jesse
Mondale
Jesse
and
Jesse Ventura.
it was Jesse, yeah. And it was like I can remember when it happened, and I was actually close at the time. I was an advisor shortly to one of the political opponents, who's mayor of St. Paul. I got brought in for a spell, and I watched this happen, and I'm like, yeah, this dude's he's an East Coaster. He ain't gonna make it. Minnesotans don't like your type here. And then so it was basically two weak candidates, and Jesse bust in kids to vote. So it was no different than Elon
Oh, yeah.
creating this opportunity as well. I mean, it was the perfect storm of everything all at once, but he just took advantage and
Yeah.
boom. And it wasn't long after Schwarzenegger won because he was famous. A famous actor won because he's the most recognizable name on a
Oh,
ballot.
yeah. Yeah.
So so there we had the Trump win, which again, let's divide and conquer, split and create distrust amongst the media. Very effective, very smart. It's using the
Well,
tool
first of all,
against.
they're a shitty media. The it was there to be broken.
Yeah, I agreed.
I
But
mean,
then,
he didn't weaken it. It was just weak. They had become politically correct,
mhm,
and they were taking their orders from corporations,
yeah,
and and
yeah, it
so.
was the most
And the
apparent.
other thing is that every
Yeah,
journalist over the last 40 years has gone through journalism school and said, here's the rules. We get to throw punches at you, but you don't get to throw punches at us. So they were
yeah,
defenseless. None of their training was ever about how we defend ourselves from attack. And
yeah,
you could just see them. They were wimpy.
yeah.
How dare he do this? He's destroying the eternal importance of the free press. Well, it wasn't a free
Yeah.
press. And the other thing is, that we're the defenders of the truth. Well, there was no truth. So I mean,
Yeah.
every punch landed because we thought that they were phony to begin with.
Yes, and I would say you could argue that 9/11 was in the first wars were the total decimation of truth because it became outrage and fear and nonstop breaking news.
And making
Journalistic
war and
integrity
making
was
war and making war.
yeah, so it turned into reality TV of the worst sort. There was no integrity because it became glue the idiot's eyes to the screens for whatever period of time. Um, and there's always something going on, and the characters, the quote unquote journalists, did whatever they could to maintain massive consumption of advertising dollars. So
And
here we got CNN and Fox. Now I would also argue that during that time, Rush Limbaugh, who I used to listen to, became an outrage monster. And again, it was basically the all-star wrestling of commentary, which was satire, but also I think he was probably one of the biggest mouthpieces of hate. And I say this, I used to listen to him, I used to laugh until one day I just felt sick and I realized it was turning me into an angry dick, being around that energy all the time. However,
which did you not want
radio.
to be? Which did you not want to be? Angry or a dick?
Yeah, yeah. Well, both at the same time because I would just start fights and arguments with people, and
Yeah.
I was like, I'm that guy I don't want around at Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
um, and yeah, it was to me it turned into a divisive, poisonous thing. And during that time when I was in that state, I wasn't innovating and creating at my peak, so it was a waste of energy. Yet, great entertainment. Now, if you here's one thing that I want to spend a little time on though. So if we go from Trump to Trump, in between we had Biden. What the hell happened in between there? And I don't really know how Biden got elected, which media, because he certainly is not a great speaker. He sucks on the radio. I don't think he's captivating at all on television. He's stuttering. I think there's a certain everyman aspect and trusted guy who was your friend, and there's a certain amount of earned
Mhm.
respect there. And during that time, people were sick of the outrage. So I think there was a blowback. But what the hell happened to the media in that period of time? What do you attribute that to?
Oh, COVID.
Okay.
That was and we'll get to the bottom of this of how much the COVID period, because it happened in March, in election year. It happened in March
Hmm.
in election year. So it was 2020. And you had a total Trump hating media to begin with.
Yep.
Okay. And then they played on the fact that this was presented as a world-threatening epidemic. Okay. And they brought in all sort of medical experts who really didn't know what they were talking about, but
Yep.
were given the support of the U.S. government and everything like that. So I think it really happened in the change of voting laws in the states. That in every state, there's a thing called the Secretary of State. And this is, I think, I'm not sure this is an elected office. I have to check on that. But George Soros had funded most of the secretaries of state. He had no, they're elected. Secretaries of states are elected,
Okay.
but they're not really a political role. They're the ones who oversee the voting laws of the states. And so there were, without any approval by the legislatures, there were like 220 changes of voting laws, where somebody could go to an old folks home and just get all the ballots from an old folks home. They just
Yep.
go up and down, and they would even sign them for them and everything else. And the reason I know that happened is because Um, he got 81 million. He got 81 million votes. That's how many votes Biden got. But Kamala got, I think, 8 million fewer votes than Biden did. Okay. And we
Mm.
don't know what those votes are. Nobody can account for where well, the 8 million were, they were just manufacturing votes. So that's how it happened. So I don't think it's such a big media thing, except the media totally supported the most draconian laws, during that period of
Mm.
time. And
Okay.
the investigations of this will go on for a long time. I mean, Dr. Fauci is going to be spending the next 4 or 5 years in front of Congress, and I don't know if he looks good in orange, but he should at least have a possibility of a different wardrobe as he goes forward. It was very interesting. All the DOJ, Department of Justice, the FBI, CIA, all these guys are lawyering up. Why are they lawyering up? They're getting high-priced lawyers, and because they did something wrong. They did
Hmm.
something, and they're afraid. But I don't think they're going to prosecute. I think they're going to expose. If I was
Yeah.
Trump, I wouldn't prosecute anybody, but I'd expose everybody.
That that is effectively what RFK's statement has been, and also I've seen and read. I think the shame effect. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna first of all, before I go down that, I'm gonna go down two paths. One of them is, I think if I interpreted what you said, Trump created massive distrust in the systems and media, and if I'm interpreting your version of reality, which I'm not disagreeing with, I just don't know enough to be to say, but the blowback, a pendulum swing, was the Biden administration took advantage of the distrust and also that lockdown. I mean, you could get ultra conspiratorial and say this was a massive power grab to create a huge government control system and manufacture a gigantic welfare state that created a massive deficit, largest ever, to pull power back.
No,
You know,
no, I
I
don't
could,
think it was a. I don't think it was a conspiracy. I don't think it was a conscious conspiracy. I think it was an intuitive power grab. In other words, that on the Democratic side, the only thing they know and respect is power. Okay, so
Mhm.
if you take advantage of a situation to get more power, they do it. I mean, my whole sense of the left, period, is that politics is everything because there's no God, there's no anything else.
Mhm.
Politics is God, and you want the most power to do it. I mean, they're like rattlesnakes. You cut off their head, they can still kill you. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, and my sense is that the media was totally bought into one side of the political spectrum. They
Uh,
wanted power too. The media wanted power. I mean, I want power. You want power. Okay.
yeah.
Except I do it through negotiation rather than grabbing.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
that is fascinating. But either way, my reaction when I was listening to you is it's a pendulum swing blowback that Trump created this momentum of
I think he
distrust.
articulated a momentum that was already happening.
I completely agree. And I think
I
this
mean, I
last
think
election was
Ross Perot is one of the beginners of
yes.
this. The
Yeah.
televangelists in the 70s and 80s are part of it. This was a blowback that was coming. It was long in the swing. It's just that Trump is a great articulator.
Hmm.
I don't think he created this. I think he wrote it because he
I
has the guts to actually stand up and take hits.
yeah. Well,
Very few politicians could take the risks that he does.
Trump, you're saying.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, no, it's
I
that
mean, he
became
gets he gets winged in the air, and his hand goes up like this.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah.
That what
No,
you don't you
that
don't re,
was
you don't rehearse that.
that I think that's truly a defining moment. And I
Oh,
can remember watching it and going, huh, that's fascinating. Well, and
it won
every
over Elon. That was the thing that won
that
over
was it.
Elon.
It was
Yep.
it. I remember the moment it happened. I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. Because before then, I was still in the anyone's game, and you know I was chatting with, and I've talked about this before, Kurt and Kristen Ludhart, who have been the political folks for 15 years and responsible for hundreds of Republicans getting elected. I was talking to them in real time,
Yep.
and they still didn't know. They were like, "Man, anyone's game," but that was, let's see what's going to come out of this. But again, I would, if we bring it all the way back to what is so great about podcasting, is that is the one medium that is the most intimate and is the least controlled. There is no big media. There's no Facebook. There's no Google. There is no, or Meta rather. Even Apple doesn't own or dominate. Spotify doesn't own or dominate. Now, there are channels. Spotify gave Joe Rogan, I think they just renewed, it's $100 million deal a year plus. I mean, he's got to be in the, that guy's got $1 billion worth of leverage available to him at
Doing
any
well.
time. And he
He's doing
has,
well.
and people who talk about what he's done for comedy and the arts in Austin. But anyway, I do think we're in what I love most, intimate, nobody's in control as long as you want. And now it is about character, entertainment, engagement, and intimacy. And I think intimate media is the most important media. And I believe that what we'll see is a reflection of this. I pray that we don't see a consolidation. I want it to stay in the hands of all of us, just like we have control over
Well,
this podcast.
yeah. But what do you think about the possibility that by the very nature of who they are, the Democrats cannot use this medium?
That,
I
well,
mean,
it
it's
goes
not.
to show the unlikability of the character and how many they can't walk without destroying themselves in a
I mean,
minefield
yeah,
of,
I think Hillary tried to do podcasting, and I mean, it fizzled right from the first episode, uh, and everything else. You can't lecture on podcasts.
yeah. No,
You
you're gonna have
can't
a tiny
lecture.
narrow audience. Yes, right.
Yeah,
You're right.
you can have strong opinions, but you can't lecture. Because I just think, and I don't know if I've ever seen this before, but just psychologically, philosophically, and politically, who the left is, it makes podcasting impossible for them.
I here's I'm gonna say in general, I agree with you. I would
What would
suggest
it take for
that.
you what would it take for you to agree with me 100%?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, here I'm going to give you an instance, and he's not liberal. Okay, he's liberal, but he's not on the left, which is Bill Maher.
Yeah,
Um, I his past episodes, for a while he lost me, and and I paid attention to him. I watched him for decades. He's my regular Friday night stuff, and I really studied the hell out of him, and I've read his books. His podcast is fantastic. He brings on everyone. He is
yep,
not afraid to bring on anyone, and he offers to have everyone on there. Now, he does have his bias, but like he got up in one of his last episodes and he said, "You idiots, you lost, you effed us all." And his core thing is we have to protect liberalism and being able to say what we have and be an entertainer. And he's got his own fears, but the best left are going to be comedians first.
well,
You got to be an entertainer.
John Stewart's doing a really good job right now.
He's so
Well, first of all,
talented.
he's very funny.
He is. Yeah, he's an entertainer.
But he
Just
was,
like,
yeah, but he was funny before. I mean,
totally.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I don't feel dirty after I
yeah.
watch or listen to him. And look, I did the same thing. The Daily Show, watched it every single night that it was on for decades. Um, and I loved the tear ups. And I have to say I was persuaded by his perspective. I've never found Tucker Carlson to be palatable. Which, by the way, he went to school at the same school that my son went to. It's Loyola Country Day, and he's not a liked person here. There's a lot of people, but I see the genius in what he
I
does.
like it. I
He's
like
an
him when he goes
entertainment.
manic.
Oh, his,
No, he
he's
went
an,
manic a couple of times on stage, a
he
couple of weeks.
totally did.
He
Yeah,
did.
and
And
you saw
I
Joe's
said
face.
I kind of like it when you go out of control, like it's kind of neat.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm with you. So I
can,
again,
can
here's
we
what
put hey, can
I
we put out a general shout out for Joe
Joe
Polish?
Polish.
Just the
Hell
way that
yeah,
he moderated an amazing day where he had Bobby Kennedy, he had Jordan
Jordan
Peterson,
Peterson
and
and Tucker.
Callie Means, who's
Yes,
not as well known as the other three, but I think you see a lot of blueprints of Callie Means behind the
yes,
movement of transforming the healthcare system. But
and
Joe is just this incredibly useful moderator. That's
he has
that's
turned
the
into one of the
greatest con the
greatest interviewers.
greatest
Yes,
compliment that I can get. I think Joe, I said, Joe, when you wake up tomorrow morning, you're going to be 10 times higher in your confidence about what you just pulled off today.
and he is in a position where he is 1 degree of separation from the most powerful people in government in American history.
Yeah.
And he earned it because he has been planting seeds with all of these people now for sure 6 or 7 years, but I would even argue decades before. But I mean, the cost and risk to him to pay for RFK to be there, Jordan Peterson and Tucker. Um, there's no doubt in my mind that that event did not net him money, but what it did is it created a massive increase in capital. And when you look at his
Yeah.
influence, his access, but also you look at his numbers, because I've been paying attention to his social numbers. The Jordan Peterson and the Tucker Carlson videos have been seen millions of times. The timing and the team he's assembled. Hats off to Joe for um, sticking to his guns. And there have been a few times when I've watched and listened to him, especially during the lockdown. I was like, man, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. I wouldn't have put my ass on the line like he was willing to. And I'm like, hats off, well played. And it doesn't come from a place of expecting or getting power or money. That's
Yeah.
not who he is. So
No,
deep respect.
he was, I was feeling um, very admiring and incredibly respectful towards what Joe pulled off. That, yeah, all along. I mean, last 27 years, just the constant growth. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah. Um, I in 100% agreement. I'm excited, and I had the weirdest thing happen because you and I were in the front row. The cameras were on us apparently a lot. I got so many people sending me texts saying, "I just saw you at Joe Polish's," and then with RFK or Jordan Peterson or Tucker Carlson. It was like all within 48 or 72 hours, just like boom, 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 boom. So that to be in that room during what felt like a historical moment. And I've I have never been a big fan of Donald Trump the human. I found him to be a fascinating character, but I've always had my issues with the guy for a long time. But I look at this and I'm like, this is one of the most fascinating collections
Yeah.
of
Well,
brilliant people.
just we're getting near the end here, but
We
the
are.
other people have commented on this. But I think that we're this what he's done and what we're going through right now. The various scholars have called it a realignment. There's sort of a
Yes.
realignment. And I would say there's only been four in American history. The first was Washington, and the whole way the war was won and the country was put together. And he being the first president who, after two terms, said, I'm retiring, where he could have been King George the First of the United States if he wanted to, but he didn't. You know, and so that realigned everything. The colonies became states. The country of the United States became very important in the world and has grown in importance every
Yeah.
year since then. The second one was Lincoln, because there were two countries. There was the country, and then there was the very industrial country. And Lincoln was willing to risk the entire future of the country just to get that settled. Okay.
Yeah.
And then Roosevelt, you had the political system was 30 years behind the growth of the industrial system, and the government had to be brought up to be useful within a rapidly industrializing country. And I think Trump is bringing the country into the digital networking world that the government has to come into, and you don't need 2.3 million civilian employees of the government just at the federal level to run a networked country.
Yeah.
There's no need for a Department of Education. There's no need for a Department of Labor. There's no need for Department of Agriculture. All the networks, the trade networks out there can take it. You can let the states govern them at their level. So probably we could get rid of very easily 40% of civil servants and let them explore future money-making careers.
Yeah.
If only in Alaska, and
Yeah.
or anything. And I think we're living through one of the realignments, and that's I think what makes it so interesting. Everything is realigning right now.
Yeah. I think putting the power
America
in,
doesn't have revolutions. America has realignments.
that's great. What a great way to end. And I've never been so optimistic about being an American, America, or the fact that as an entrepreneur, a founder, an entrepreneur, I feel like this is my country. And prior to that, I felt a sadness of a loss of control and a desire to not participate. And I really feel like this isn't just me. I feel an overall collected sense of peace, and even my some of my most left-leaning friends, which I live in a very divided world. I have a lot of founder, owner, entrepreneurs in my life, and I have a lot of very liberal-minded, outspoken Democrats, and I love looking at both and listening to both. But right now, you said it at the very beginning. A whole bunch of Republicans emerged in 48 hours, and I've witnessed it, seen it, observed it, and I feel an overall sense of optimism. There weren't people shooting each other out in the streets. We didn't have a revolution, and this is going to be a fascinating next
Yeah,
couple of years, as long as everyone can stay focused on the big picture, which is making sure that this is the most innovative, free country in the world.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
well,
There we go.
what an amazing episode. Once again, Dan Sullivan. I can't tell you how much I just find these to be the highlight of my life, spending time with you. And I feel like I'm wiser every time. And I hope everyone who's listening and watching feels the same way. But any final words before we wrap this episode up?
Yeah, yeah. I think we can all just personally get on amplifying our capabilities.
That's awesome. Well, here we go. Make sure you forward this episode. Joe Polish, another big I love you to you. And make sure you share this with anyone you know who would find it interesting, fascinating, and capability improving and enhancing. See you soon.